and welcome to Coffee Chats with Impact, the series that has real conversations with resilient people who have overcome the odds to succeed. My name is Kim Tapau, and my heartfelt desire is to bring you real conversations that inspire, uplift you, and make you hungry to live the life that you deserve. My guest today is Jessie X Johnson. She is a single mum of two wee cherubs, aged 2 and 11 months. So I'm pretty sure her life is pretty busy. I'm going to grab my piece of paper because I don't want to miss any of her achievements out for you, because she has achieved so much in her lifetime, especially since she said yes to herself. So let's have a look at what you've done, Jessie. Jessie currently runs a Freedom Lifestyle Entrepreneur Group, a digital marketing business. She's a personal coach. She's a mum on a mission to bring up conscious children. And you know what? She really wants to inspire mums to know that they can have it all if they're just brave enough to fully step into their personal power and say yes to themselves no matter what. So welcome, Jessie. I'm so grateful to have you here. It's really exciting. I know we're kindred spirits on a lot of things, and I know that this conversation is a conversation that many women around the world, and actually some men, are really going to relate to. So I hear that you used to be a bit of a gypsy, you know, traveling around the world. Can you share with me a little bit about that time in your life? What inspired you, and what was your favorite thing to do?
Absolutely, I would love to. And thank you so much for that introduction. I'm like welling up over here. It was so nice. I didn't expect that at all. That was amazing. And just quickly before I get started, like Kim, you're someone that I love watching on social media and seeing you show up, and I've listened to some of your trainings within our community. So, you know, when you messaged me about this, I was really blown away, and I'm just so grateful to be here with you. So I just want to thank you for that. Oh, we've got a visitor already. But yeah, so when I was in my 20s, I actually took myself to Europe for my 21st birthday. So I had return flights to London 5 weeks apart, and I took off on my own. I had no accommodation booked. I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And I drank a bottle of vodka the night before I left and packed my bags. Freaking out, like absolutely freaking out. Didn't know what I was going to do. And I honestly had like the most amazing experience. Oh, what's the matter?
You know what? Real conversations, because that's what real mums do. Oh, are you okay?
You okay? Oh. Do you want mommy's coffee cup? Yeah, that is it.
The power of distraction. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, there's that, and then I've got my foot rocking the pram of my other one. So just relax, bub. You can sit here with me. Yeah, you have that.
Isn't that a sign of resilience? You've got to be able to pivot and do stuff when you have to.
All about pivoting as a mum. So I took myself to Europe. I did England, Ireland, France, Italy, Germany, the Czech Republic, Holland, back to London and home. And I think after that, it took me about 6 months to pack my life up in Australia, and I just wanted to go. So I did whatever I could to travel. I spent 2 years heavily backpacking around the world, lots of Asia. I did 25 countries in that time, and I just couldn't stop. Like, I would come home extremely broke, work my ass off, work in bars, you know, like make as much money in tips as I possibly could, and then I'd be off again. And people got to know that about me, and everyone started calling me Gypsy, and I got a map of the world tattooed around my leg, and there's like marks for all the countries I've been to. And it was just crazy, but I felt in so much flow, and I have never felt like that before. You know, I never felt like that at home. I never felt like that in Australia. I was homeschooled for a year and traveled around Australia in a caravan when I was in primary school. So, you know, I have seen my own country, but I never felt as good here as I did while I was overseas. And having those experiences and being in different cultures and being in a lot of third world countries and just seeing how other people lived, that was really inspiring for me. And I actually got a tattoo done in New Zealand, up in the Bay of Islands, and it's the 4 winds that she did. Traditionally, like freehand, I had to get the blessing before and everything.
Wow.
And it's, yeah, the north, south, east and west winds, because I literally was just kind of going where the wind blew. And that was my life for the majority of my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're living the life you love, you're traveling the world, and you come back home and you're stepping into yourself, and then you find 2 blue lines that literally kind of change your life overnight. How was it for you transitioning from this gypsy who gets to travel the world and do whatever to then becoming a mama too?
Look, it was extremely unexpected. I never really thought I was going to have kids. I never, I guess I could never really see it happening. I was 13 when my sister was born. So I've always been the big sister and really good babysitter, but I loved giving them back. So, you know, I was in no rush at all. And I think that was another reason I just really wanted to get so much out of my system while I could, because I didn't have the mortgage and, you know, the partner and all the things kind of tying me down. And I didn't ever want, if I did have kids, to be resentful towards them. So, yeah, I think I got a lot out of my system. And then I mentioned to you earlier, I came home and you know, some things started happening between my parents and grandparents and things that they were telling me that just wasn't adding up. And so I ended up having this massive identity crisis. So it wasn't as kind of drastic as like 1 minute I was traveling and then I'm pregnant and have to come home. I did come home and I wanted some grounding, because I started, I guess if I'm really honest with myself, I did start to get lonely traveling around the world, you know, on my own. It was amazing. But there was an element of loneliness that was starting to set in. And, you know, I was like getting, you know, to mid to late 20s and, you know, still kind of at ground zero. When I came home, I knew it was kind of starting fresh, you know. So I had all of those thoughts as well, and ended up coming home, living with my dad on 90 acres for a couple of years, and I went off all social media. My friends call it ghosting, like I ghosted everybody. I just disappeared and really went inwards for quite some time. In that time, I met my now ex-husband. Excuse me, Mummy's talking, darling. Thanks, sweetheart. Yeah, and so we were in a pretty, it was pretty full on in the beginning. It was great, and then things started to get toxic, and you know, he was in and out and moving in and out, and he actually had moved out and we'd split up when I found out I was pregnant. So that was a huge shock for me, and it was not at all where I wanted to be when I found out that I was pregnant. So I kind of sat down with him and said, like, I'm either doing this on my own or we go all in, and we get married, and I want to have the same surname as the child. You know, like, it's all or nothing. You need to start contributing to my mortgage and paying your way. And, you know, he never worked or anything like that. So it was not the situation I ever wanted to be in. I never wanted to raise a child on my own. You know, I'd seen my mum have different relationships, different marriages, and, you know, I've got 2 sisters because of it, but none of them are from the same 2 parents. So I really didn't want that. And, yeah, and I was basically looking down that barrel of, oh, I'm going to have a child on my own, and this is the last thing I ever wanted to happen, and it's happening. Like, what the F am I going to do?
So would I be right then that he decided to fully commit at that point, and you guys went on that journey together, even though deep down inside you probably to a certain degree felt that maybe that wasn't the right step for you at this point in time?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very toxic. My entire pregnancy, he was accusing me of having affairs and, you know, all these things. And I worked full time right up until I think 2 weeks before I gave birth. And yeah, the whole time I was just, it's like you're watching, you know, when you're watching a movie and you're watching people and you're like, don't do that. That's not going to end well. That was like me watching my life as an observer, just going, don't do it. You know, it's not going to end well. Don't do it. But, you know, of course, for the wrong reasons, trying to do the right thing and wanting, you know, I didn't know that I was having a boy until he was born. Both of them were surprises. I never found out the sex. So with my son, I didn't want him to not have a father figure around. So, you know, I just really tried to make things work and, you know, came across the digital business that we're both a part of while I was pregnant again, unexpectedly. And I started doing so much of that inner work, and I started doing so much of that gratitude work, and I started feeling so much better about my situation. Although the situation wasn't improving, I was improving and my mindset was improving, and it was making it easier for me to cope in a bad situation.
It's funny, a lot of us, I love your analogy, you're watching yourself from the outside looking in and going, don't do that. You know, I can really relate to your story. I've been in a toxic relationship, or actually mine, if I'm honest, it wasn't toxic, it was abusive, and you know, kind of life and death at one stage. But none of those relationships happen overnight. And when we make that decision to step into, and I think it's really important that we, you know, let people know out there that, because we always hear that thing, why do people stay? Why do people be in that relationship? Why don't they just leave? Why do they let them speak to them like that? And without being disrespectful to those people, you don't understand what it's like, because when somebody doesn't necessarily have to be violent to be a domestic relationship or be toxic, and they're very clever at manipulating you in the aspect they slowly eventually get your friends to go away, and that you're solely reliant on them, and
isolate. Yeah.
And they break down your self-esteem, and you become and you feel really unworthy. And I can see why you started getting some of that power, because all of a sudden you're a part of a community or a family who are helping you with the mindset and the gratitude and things like that. But when you're stuck right in it, you believe what they say. And yeah, it's, for me, I never even told my story about my mine got so bad that I ended up having to go. In New Zealand, we have an organization called Women's Refuge who come and take you and put you somewhere safe. And for me, I remember hiding under the bed waiting for them to come and get me, and him trying to get into the house. And my husband now with me, we've been together 22 years. And we're going to be able to start adding my age up soon. But I never told anybody, not even my husband, and came out publicly and shared my story for almost 23 years. I hid that shame, and it wasn't until I worked through this community that I realized I needed to release all of that before I could be empowering for my children. So what was the moment that you kind of realized that this isn't going to be the relationship anymore for your children and for yourself? That what made you be brave enough to say yes to you and your babies? Like, what was it? Because we all have that line in the sand moment.
There was a definite line in the sand moment, and like you say, it doesn't happen overnight, and so when you leave, that doesn't happen overnight either. So I guess for me, when I found out I was pregnant with Claire, I was completely devastated, because I was already done with the marriage. I was completely done. My son was 9 months old, and I was done. I was already at that point then. I found out I was pregnant again, went to the midwives and just broke down. I was like, I can't do this again.
Yeah, give me a
with
break.
this man. Like, I just can't do it. Like, what am I going to do? And, you know, I'm not going to get rid of the baby. So I'm with it now. And I just needed to shut that down. Like, I needed to not feel like that. And I didn't allow myself to explore how I initially felt when I found out. So then it was a whole other 9 months of just putting up with crap. But I was so already distant emotionally that I was just like, whatever, I'm just done, you know. And I'd tell him this entire year, actually, whenever he'd turn on me or start, I'd just be like, I effing hate you, like, to his face. I'd just be like, I hate you, go away, like, just leave me alone. So it got to that point that I was just so done. For a lot of people, they were really shocked when they found out that there was DV and that I'd had to take the children and all the things. But for me, I'd already gone through all of the emotions in the marriage, and I was already done when I left. I know for a lot of women, they're not there when they leave, and it's still quite a long road for them. I was already done living with the person. So I, you know, like, I had all of that resentment and that anger and that rage, and I was just so frustrated all the time, and I was disappointed in myself more than anything. So one night he went next door, got drunk again like he does, left me with the screaming kids at dinner time to deal with them, and off he went. You know, came home at 10, 11, woke us all up pissed, the usual kind of thing he would do every week. And I'm like, just go away, you know, like, I'm just done. So I actually closed the bedroom door and put a baseball bat behind the door, because it fit perfectly between the door and the wardrobe, to try and keep him out, because you couldn't lock the doors. And I'd done it before, and he'd broken through the door before, and like the baseball bat had gone through the door. So I did it like in a different spot this time, because there was already like a hole in one spot. Like, this is just the craziness that I'm like, you knew this was going to happen again and you're still here. Like, what are you doing, Jessie? You know, wake up to yourself, girl. So I'm in there with a baby. This was in January. So she was born in October. So she was 3 months old, asleep in the pram. I had Connor like this awake, because he could hear everything going on, and there's this constant torment up and down, and he'd be yelling things through the door and all the rest of it. So he eventually, about 2 o'clock in the morning, broke through the door again, and I had Connor. I was rocking him and singing him nursery songs, and just trying to like cover his ears over, and like, it's okay, just look at me, talk to me, don't worry about that, what's going on, like, it's okay. This was what I was doing for hours. And he came over, and for some reason I just started recording him that night. I'd never really done it before. I'd thought about it, but for whatever particular reason, maybe because I was just at that point of, I'm out, like, I'm so out, I was recording him. And after about half an hour of the like recording him, he actually broke through the door, came and pushed me while I was holding Connor. And that's when I went, you know what, I'm calling the police. So I called 000. I had the police come out. In that time, he'd gone and locked himself out of the house. So the police rock up. They need to be subjective to what's going on in the situation. So all it looks like is I'm crazy inside, just had a baby, and I've locked him out of the house, and I'm calling the police on him, and nothing's happened. So this was the way that he was playing the game. So the police are banging at the door. I didn't know what's going on. I've like reefed up the baseball bat, gone out of the bedroom, opened the door. There's a police officer standing there. I'm standing there with a baseball bat. And he's like, you can put the bat down. I was like, sorry, I didn't know who was banging at the door. And he's like, well, what's going on? You know, Cameron's out here. He was locked out of the house. And I'm like, oh, was he really? He locked himself out. And he was like, oh yeah, you know, who do I believe? It's he said, she said. So would you like to listen to some of the recordings? He's like, oh, yes, please. No joke. He listened to 2 minutes, handed my phone over to me and said, I'm going to go make a phone call. And I'm like, I don't really know what's happening here. Went and made a phone call, came back, said, look, we're going to take him and lock him up for the night until he sobers up. He's being charged with the DVO. And I'm like, what is that? Said, oh, it's a domestic violence order. I said, but he's not normally physically violent, it's just verbal. And he's like, that is domestic violence, Jessie. And I'm like, whoa, really? Because that happens all the time. I'm just used to that. That's the
Wow.
kind of behavior that I get almost daily. And he's like, that's not okay, Jess. Like, that's domestic violence. That's not okay. And that for me was like, wow, I am actually not crazy. There's like legally something going on here. And I was just so convinced and so told that this was all me and everything was my fault, that I never did anything or shared it with anybody, and was so shameful and guilty about it that I just put up with it for years. And it wasn't until he got, you know, pushed me with my child that I finally called the police, and the police were the ones that told me, no, this is what's happening. And they charged him. It wasn't even me who charged him. It was them, on the evidence that they had in that moment. And it just kind of went from there. So that was my line in the sand moment, was when he got actually physical while I was holding our son, that I'm like, no, that's it. I think that was all I needed. You just needed to push it that one step further for me to be like, it's 100% not getting better, it's getting worse. And I was already done a year ago. I've just tried to make it work for the sake of the children. Now it's going to be detrimental. And just one more thing on that, which also, I guess, reaffirmed what I had done, was the following morning when we woke up, my toddler closed the door and put the bat back behind the door. So I was like, there is no way I am going to raise a son who thinks that behavior is appropriate, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let my daughter think that she can be treated like that and that is okay.
Wow. Yeah, I part of me's, I can feel every single feeling that you went through, and I want to highlight a couple of key things that you said right now, because I have no doubt that somebody watching this is going to be in exactly where you are right now. And the key things I want to highlight is what the police officer said to you was, that's domestic violence. Because we see on the TV, or we've brought up in a society that says domestic violence is if you get hit, that you have something on your body, that person does something physical to you. But anybody that is emotionally, violent to you in the aspect, they tell you you're not good enough. They tell you what you should wear. They tell you every time you do something, it's not good enough. That they, anything that makes you feel scared is a form of domestic violence.
Yeah.
Or
100% it is.
Or the thing where aspect of, like you just said, you made you think it was your fault, that you were going crazy, like
that I needed counselling to deal with my issues.
Yeah, or it was like I found, I don't know, and I can only speak for myself, but I found that they were very clever in the aspect that I remember the very first time I got hit, and I was, and I am now, but during that period of time I ended up not being. But I was actually quite a feisty person in the aspect that I stood up for myself. And I remember it was a bit like you were like, nah, bugger this, I'm not having this happen. And that was the first time I stood up and went, hey, it's not okay to do that. And that's when the first punch came. And I remember to this day how clever they are, that if you hadn't said this, or if you didn't do that, I wouldn't have hit you. And they somehow make you feel and turn it all around that, like, hold on, what was my fault? Crap. And so one of my biggest messages, and I'm really passionate about that, and like you just said, it's not okay. It's not your fault. It's never your fault from that perspective. No matter whether you were yelling at that person and telling them what they are, or, as you said, da-da-da off, it's still never okay to degrade somebody, to physically do anything. It's just not okay. Whether you're a male or a female, it's not okay. Yeah. So many people right now never leave situations like you and I have. If one of those people are watching and listening right now, what are some key steps do you think that you could share with them that so that they do say yes to themselves? What things could you say that they could potentially do to build strength in themselves to say yes to themselves?
Well, I think you just said it. You need to get to a point where you're strong enough and brave enough to even check yourself in the mirror and be like, you need to take full responsibility for this. It's not his fault or her fault. It's not anybody else's fault right now but yours, because you're staying. And you know that staying is going to continue to give you these same results. So you really need to, dial into starting to fill yourself, even if it's books, because a lot of the time, like my phone was monitored, my internet was monitored. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup. He would leave the house with the car that had the car seats in it, so I couldn't leave the house. Like, he made it very challenging for me to even start to look at what was happening and get educated on what was happening. So joining this business, I mean, God, you can imagine the arguments that happened over buying a water machine. Like, fuck. And I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? You don't even pay any bills anyway. So, like, I'm just going to pay for it. And I didn't even have to tell you. I'm just telling you because, like, I'm a decent person, but I'm doing this. So I was dialed into the personal development and the growth. And I would actually sit in front of him with my phone and do the 90-day sprints, or, like the 4A group and like the weekly huddles. And he would hate it. He would absolutely hate it. And I was just at the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm getting way more out of this than what I'm getting for you. So you can hate it all you want. So I was at that point in myself with my own inner strength and self-worth that it was like, you know what? I'm building up so much from this. I don't care what you have to say. And I think you need to get to a point like that where you can be reading or you can be reaching out and getting help somehow, and you don't care what the consequences are. And until you get to that point, it's going to be very challenging for anyone to seek help. I know my hairdresser, she's put a few things out recently on social media where she was like, book in for a hair appointment, even if it's not to get your hair cut, but come and talk to me and let me help you get help. So there's other ways around it without even letting them know, I guess, like what you're doing and where you're heading. But you need the support, you need the information and the knowledge. And I plugged into all of the local domestic violence people in my area. And without them, I would have struggled a lot, because, I'm getting triggered from things. So then I'm calling up professionals that deal in domestic violence and family law, who I could debrief with over the phone for 10 minutes, and they would set me straight, like, okay, this has happened, this is how I'm feeling. And they're like, cool, this is the game, these are the boundaries, this is what you're looking at, this is the long term. Understand that if you do this and you give in now, these are going to be the ongoing effects of it later on. And it's like, oh, okay, that all makes so much sense. So without that knowledge coming to you, you really are going to feel powerless, because all you've got coming in is the negative and the, degrading, and everything's your fault and you're not good enough. And, they tell you they want you to do something, so you start doing it and it's still not good enough. You want to look nice for them, so you put a bit of eye makeup on, but it's for somebody else. Like you're going to be stuck in that cycle. So you need to figure out whatever it looks like for you on starting to fill up those spaces with something more positive and more empowering, to give you, I guess, that separation where you really just start to not give a fuck what they think.
So I suppose, like, you're super inspiring, and and I appreciate your vulnerability, and it, someone watching this, your candor might seem, like, man, she's got her A together. But when we go through something like that, it's never gone within ourselves. It's consistent work and consistent trying to bring it together. And I suppose for those of you who, people who are watching that, I suppose my key advice from that, and I'm sure you can 100% agree with it, is being around a community of people who are wanting to go the same direction that you're wanting to go. But even if you can't do that, that you are so controlled, that you just start with gratitude. Start focusing and just shifting your own personal vibration initially. And as you said, reaching out to those people can literally be one of the key things, really, just to start and just to not ever give up, I suppose, is the key.
Yeah, but you do have to get to that point. I mean, the magic, I've got PDF copies, so if anybody wants one, I'm more than happy to like email it through. But with the magic, you know, I was literally writing pages and pages and pages in a book of like, I love Cameron and Cameron loves me, because it was that bad. It was that bad that I was like, I would write pages and pages and pages of it. And then I started, because he started telling our son at a very young age, I could hear him from other rooms putting me down to my son. I would then write pages and pages of I love Connor and Connor loves me, because I was feeling so disconnected as a person and as a mother. And it's like, where do you start? Where do you start from that? Like, I've had suicidal thoughts. If I wasn't pregnant with Claire, I remember standing there, I think I was about 5 weeks pregnant, and there were sleeping tablets on the bench because my ex was a stoner. So to try and get off the pot, he needed sleeping tablets. And I remember just staring at them. And in my head, I was like, if I wasn't pregnant right now, I would take every single one of them.
Wow.
And I was just thinking about it and just not wanting to be here anymore, not wanting to put up with any of it anymore. And I didn't see a way out. Like,
you know what? You know what? I'm sure there is millions of people and everyone watching this conversation today that are super grateful that you that you didn't take that opportunity. And I know we've all had moments, and I think through your whole story, everything from traveling to then coming back and discovering ourselves and then going through motherhood and being brave enough to go, you know what, I'm going to try and make this work, that you have, shown so much grit and resilience through that piece of, that whole journey of your life. And you've achieved so much now. I mean, obviously when I listed off all of your achievements in the very beginning of this chat, you're a light to show, you know what, no matter what, that you've just shared all of these horrible things that happened to you, you haven't let them define who you are. And that's a really amazing message that we want to share out to the people, out to everybody, is that we are not what happens to us. It's what we decide to choose to do with that thing that happens to us. And we all have a choice. So I have one last question before we start wrapping up today, and it's a question I ask everybody on my series, and it's, if you could pick a song, a book, an activity that, you know what, helps you be resilient or empowers you when you're right in the midst of a challenge, that the shit's hitting the fan, what would that be?
100% The Magic. The book The Magic. 100%. It took me a really long time to get through the exercises in one go. I think it was maybe the 4th time I attempted it, because I'd always get a week in, and then I get like 2 weeks in, and it took a while. But I use those practices all the time now without even thinking about it, and my life just manifests everything that I need so easily, so effortlessly. And the challenges that do come up, like, you have the tools to work through them almost on the spot. And I mean, I was actually triggered a lot yesterday, so I was joking that I must be due for my period, because I don't normally get triggered like that. I was like, whoa, I'm getting really emotional. This is a bad day for me. Like,
now that's a stereotype, isn't it, really?
I bet you I'll get it in like a week or something, because it was a bad day for me yesterday. Like, I really need to do the magic again, don't I? Like, that was the first thing that I thought, was I need to do that again, and just like, double down back into my gratitude and manifesting everything to appear. Because, like magic, it's like every single pore of our body, if there was like a gold cord coming out of it, like whatever cord you're pulling on is what you're pulling closer to you. So if you're negative and you're dwelling in the shit, then you're only attracting more shit to come and more things like to complain about, right?
Yeah.
So that for me, the law of attraction and the magic and just being able to manifest things like magic is life-changing for me.
Okay. So for those of you who are wondering what The Magic is, The Magic is a book by Rhonda Byrne. She was the author of the movie The Secret. And I agree with you. It's a fantastic book. I have it by my bed as well. And I've read it a number of times and pulled it out when I've like gone, oh, really? What's going on? Because you know what? Every day we have challenges.
Yeah.
I really just want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. And you know what? Being so vulnerable and so honest with your story. I believe inside each and every one of us, we hold two, you know what, key superpowers to succeed. And, you know, for me, I believe those two powers are grit and resilience. And if I think about grit is the continuous effort towards a goal, even when we struggle, when we falter, and when we actually fail. And resilience is our ability to bounce back and really look and dive in and learn from the struggle that we've had and keep moving towards our goals, which is something that you're doing on a daily basis. It's kind of like, my analogy for it is grit is the engine that keeps us moving and resilience is the oil that makes everything go together.
Love that.
So today, that's our episode of Coffee Chats with Unpacked. I really hope, everybody, that it inspired you, it uplifted you, it made you hungry for a better life. And I'm really excited to see everybody on the next episode. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, everybody.
So
much love.